The words on the letter looked like they'd been written in invisible ink, present but deliberately hiding. "We regret to inform you," they'd all gathered in the university hallway after the committee meeting, stoic faces lined with the cool efficiency that Sydney's winter always seemed to encourage. The older woman from the review board, Mrs. Fenwick, she'd looked me in the eye, her voice as neutral as polished stone. "Liam, it's simply not an academic thesis. We couldn't find the necessary rigor." My hands had grown cold holding the printouts of my project. I'd tried to show them the world I could see, the hidden dust on George Street, the sleepy resilience of old men playing chess at Hyde Park, the slant of the afternoon light as it crept past the Opera House. They wanted formulas. I wanted photographs. Even as a little kid, I'd believed there was a hush just before I pressed the shutter, a pause that was holy, even if no one else felt it. But none of that had mattered in that brutal, airless conference room. On my way out, I passed the rows of congratulatory handshakes, faces bright from acceptance letters, dreams scooped up in neat envelopes. Mine was crumpled in my fist. I stepped outside and felt the chilly breath of winter snap at my face. The city seemed indifferent. At home, the lights were already on in the kitchen, that familiar glow through the frosted window. My father's voice cut through when I closed the door. "Well," the anxious expectation made me want to vanish. I handed him the letter. My mother sank silently onto the edge of her chair. My little sister, Pippa, hovered at the door. My father read it in one swift glance, a frown drawing his eyebrows together. "Waste of time, that camera," he muttered, tossing the letter onto the table as though to rid himself of any association with it. "I told you people need real jobs," his words strung not for their novelty but for their inevitability. "We can't all be bloody artists, Liam," my uncle chimed in later that week at family dinner, waving his fork casually in my direction. "What, you think you're going to wander the world and people will actually pay you for pictures? We all have to grow up sometime." Even Pippa's hopeful voice, "But you're really good, Lee," seemed fragile beneath the laughter that followed. The weight of their dismissal stayed with me for months. At my retail job stocking shelves, in the cramped brown studio apartment I rented above a Thai takeaway, in my midnight walks along the sandstone edges of Circular Quay. My camera sat on my dresser, staring at me like a dog waiting for its owner to remember its existence. There were nights I almost left Sydney for good. The loneliness whittled at me, sharp and insistent. Each rejection email from magazines or failed job application pressed heavier than the last. A voice, my father's maybe, or my own, started to repeat, "Time to grow up." But then I'd see something, a man's reflection stretched across a puddle after rain, a seagull pinwheeling above a trio of children as they squealed past on their scooters, and I couldn't help myself. I'd take the camera out, line it up. Hold my breath for that silence. When I finally responded to the job listing, looking for an energetic travel photographer, risk taker, show us Sydney in a new way, I had nothing left to lose. I sent in my portfolio at 3 a.m, hands shaking, breath held. The editor called 3 days later, her voice brisk and unapologetic even at 8 a.m. "Some of these are shaky but brave," she said. "Where'd you get that shot of the busker in Martin Place with the red balloon?" "I waited 4 hours in the cold. He only brings it on Thursdays." She laughed. "You're hired on trials. Don't screw around." I went out the next morning with renewed purpose, feeling both reckless and sharp-edged. Sydney unspooled before me, hazy and familiar, the grind of buses at Central, early sun flashing off glass towers, magpies fighting over scraps outside a bakery. Each assignment burrowed deeper into the city's skin. I learned to see past the expected, to catch the brief and raw, the shadow of grief in a groom's face at a courthouse, the brittle calm of a widow unpacking her garden tools. The city changed for me and so did my work. The editor grew warmer. "You have a voice," she said one afternoon. "You're making us look twice." My shots appeared in citywide magazines. One got picked up by a tourist campaign. I traveled further, coastal towns, outback dust. My images little by little stitched across social feeds, then walls, then billboards. Invitations trickled in, then invitations became contracts, with the tourism board, with environmental groups, with art galleries. People started to remember my name. Sometimes there would be months without seeing my family, and sometimes I'd catch myself thinking of their dinner table laughter and feel both free and bruised all at once. It was Pippa who kept in touch most. "Saw your billboard by Town Hall," one text read, "still using the old Nikon." 3 years after my rejection, an email arrived that changed everything. The Art Gallery of New South Wales was choosing a local photographer for its City and Home exhibition, a celebration of old and new Sydney. They wanted my series, Between the Lines, the one I shot mostly by intuition on those hungry night walks after my dreams had been laughed away. Everything after that happened at high velocity: invitations, interviews, features. The gallery director, an elegant woman who wore scarves like banners, walked me through the bustling white halls, already hung with bristling blueprints and ladders. "These pieces speak beyond the frame, Liam," she said. "You've brought this city's quiet corners to life." I felt the old ache in my chest, the memory of that beige university hallway, the cold silence that came after a slammed door. But now the gallery lights glimmered on my prints. My family received their invitations a week later. On the night of the opening, I wore the suit my mother had insisted on for job interviews. Sydney glowed outside long after sunset, lights stippled across the harbour, the water inky and restless. The gallery teemed with people. I saw familiar faces, editors, friends, even a couple from my old building. Journalists circled with notebooks and questions. I felt exposed but strangely calm, something like serenity humming beneath my ribs. My family arrived together. Pippa was nervous but excited, her hair in messy curls. My father's shoes were polished the way he did for big events. My mother wore her best coat, a small smile fighting its way across her lips. My uncle trailed behind, his wrinkled suit jacket too tight at the shoulders. We stood in front of my largest print, Dawn Ultimo. It showed an elderly woman standing at her tiny balcony, arms folded, backlit by bruised blue sky. The gallery lights made every wrinkle in her face a badge, every piece of Sydney brick behind her somehow tender and fierce. Pippa pointed wordlessly, eyes wide. My mother's breath hitched. My father said nothing for a long time. People stopped to look at the work, some nodded, others leaned into the wall text, reading aloud. Liam Mackenzie, 2022 archival inkjet print, The Dignity of Ordinary Beginnings. Theo, my childhood neighbour, sidled up, mouth agape. "You did all this?" I nodded, yes. Over years. When my father finally spoke, his voice felt forced, scraped out from a well too deep. I never thought," he trailed off, searching for something to anchor himself. My uncle let out a low whistle and reached to muss my hair, but then hesitated, his hand falling back awkwardly. "Bloody hell, kid, they really pay you for this." I bit back the urge to laugh or cry. I thought about all those evenings when my camera was all I had. "They do," I said simply, "enough to live and to keep going." The gallery director found us, shaking my father's hand. "Your son has changed how we see things, Mr. Mackenzie. He's made Sydney intimate again." My father's eyes flicked to hers, then to me and back to the photograph. He said nothing, but his grip on my shoulder was solid. Word spread among the old neighborhood. Friends who hadn't spoken to me in years sent congratulatory messages. People who'd usually laughed whenever I took my camera to a birthday party acted like they'd always believed in me. Even Mrs. Fenwick, the review board matriarch, attended the exhibition. She caught me as I slipped from the main room later that night for air, heels clicking briskly down the corridor. "You showed us, Liam," she said, voice softened by age and something almost gentle. "Not many people do that." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As the night thinned, I stood outside the gallery, the city singing around me, traffic buzz, laughter, the salty tang of the breeze off the harbour. My family clustered nearby. I heard my father's voice, low but proud, describing the photographs to an old workmate. He waited for that balloon, 4 hours in the cold just for one shot. For the first time in years, I felt none of the sharp resentment that had gnawed at me. The anger that had been my fuel had softened, replaced by something sturdy and quiet. The serenity of success, not loud or boastful but assured. I had seen the moment, captured it despite disbelief, and tonight, finally, those who doubted saw what I saw as plain as day. After the crowds faded and the gallery emptied around us, I walked my family back to the car, our footsteps echoing on the stones. My father paused at the curb, pulling me aside. "I was wrong, son, about the camera. About what's real." He hesitated, then held me briefly, a heavy hand on the back of my neck. For a beat, we stood in the half-light of the street lamps, the magnitude unspoken but understood. "Home for supper this weekend?" my mother asked, smoothing my lapel with gentle pride. "Of course," I answered, "always." As we drove through the city I'd photographed 1,000 times, I blinked through the glass at the familiar streets, streaked with memory and possibility. The opera house glimmered on the horizon, its white sails serene against the indigo sky. This was still my home, these were still my people. The city had shifted, yes, but so had I. And in that quiet return, surrounded by the laughter that once cut and now held me close, I understood at last that I had never truly left.